There are a few customizations that I think you'll find helpful when it comes to working with your pivot tables. One is grouping your row labels together. For example, I can group all my row labels alphabetically, like all my A's together, B's, C's, my two M's. To do that, all you have to do is go ahead and select them. Select the first row label, hold down the Control key and select the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, and then let go of the Control key when you're done selecting them. That may be a little bit annoying when you have to scroll if you've got a lot of them and Control clicking. Instead, I recommend you collapse your pivot table, and to do that, as you recall, come up here, click on the Options tab, go to the Active Field group, and then click on the Collapse Entire Field. Now when you click on it, it's not going to collapse because I have two or more labels selected. Just go ahead and click on one, and then it'll collapse. There we go. Then all you have to do, instead of Control clicking, just click and drag and select all my M's. Then come back up here to the Options tab to the Group, and then click on Group Selection. When you click on it, it does three things. The first thing that it does is that, well, it groups my M's together, gives me a generic name, and I'll show you how you can change that in just a minute. Second of all, it actually groups these others as well. Well, if it grouped them, how come it doesn't have a generic name for them? It actually just makes a copy or duplicate of their original row label name, so there's the name or the duplicate of that name up here, and that's its group name. And we can change those as well, so I can have this as my A for the All Weather Sports row label, and then Family Campers, the F, and so on. The third thing it did is it added another field to my field list, and it's going to be Company 2. Why that? Well, as you recall my row labels, when I hover over it, the field is company, and you can see that in that little pop-up there. So it's basically duplicating that and renaming it and giving it the new name. Well, when I hover over the group label, Company 2. So it puts it over here, adds it down below in the row labels up at the top. And you can treat it just like a regular field that you have in your database by unchecking it, and then when you want it, go ahead and check it to add it back in. Now when you add it back in, it doesn't pop back open where it used to be. That's because if you notice down here when it's added back in, my row labels field here, that Company 2 in the hierarchical structure is down at the bottom. In the hierarchy, it needs to be, for me, up at the top, and then it goes back to where it was before. The group labels up at the top. So to go ahead and rename all the group labels, so I can have them alphabetically, go ahead and select the first group label, then come up here in the formula bar. I'm going to delete everything but the first letter because that's going to be my A group, and then hit enter. Of course, Family Campers, delete everything but the first letter F, and then group 1, of course, type in the letter M, and then Scouting Sports. Everything goes bye-bye except for the first letter S. So now let me go ahead and click in here. I'm going to go ahead and click Collapse. Instead of scrolling past all the A's, All Weather Sports, if I had more All Weather Camping and so on, I can collapse them and just scroll past one group, the A's, to get quickly down to the M's, and then I can expand that and go, okay, what do I want to look at in this group? Well, let me go ahead and look at mountain camping. Pretty nice and very organized. Now you'll notice that for this group, we have no calculations. It says when I hover over it that there's no value, except when you collapse it, it looks like that there is a value next to it. Actually, it's just the sum quantity of the two labels down below, which is this plus that. You can see down below, when I select both of them, it says 328. So if I want to go ahead and customize this, and let's say I want the average of the group down below, the quantity, or maybe the maximum or minimum, the highest number within that group. To do that, just come over here and click on the Company 2 drop-down arrow and say you want to mess with the field settings for the Company 2, the group label. Click on it. Right now it doesn't have any subtotals. We can go ahead and customize that and say let's go get the average for the entire group, and then go ahead and click OK. Now when you do that, you're probably going to look at this and go, that's not right. I mean, if you get the average of these three cells and control click those cells, if you look down in the stat bar it says 36.4, but up here it says 9.9. It's not adding up these cells and dividing it by the total number of cells that are selected here. It's doing it over on your database. Now if I scroll down, as you recall, I've got all my M's. And here's the quantity beginning with Mirror Lake. So if I go ahead and select the first two, the total is 6. There it is, 6. Divided by the total I have selected 2 gives me the average of 3. So what it's doing is it's taking all the M's here. Let me see if I can get this right. gives me the total, divides it by the count, and that gives us the average 9.9, and that's what you're looking at here. So keep that in mind, okay, when you do some customizations. There's one more customization that I can show you. For example, back on my worksheet, let me go ahead and hit Control Home. I've got the price of each product and then the total quantity. Now, if I multiply both of those, then I get the total amount for that order ID or the date that they made that order. Now, if I didn't have the total here and I just had the price each and the quantity, and I'm back in my pivot table, I'm like, oh, I could certainly use that. You could go back to the spreadsheet and then go ahead and add that extra column in and make those changes to include it in your pivot table. And then when you do, of course, you want to include that field, the total field, into your field list. So to do that, you want to come up here after you select your pivot table, of course, click on the options, click on Change Data Source, click on it, and then it says, okay, where's your data source now? You'd have to go ahead and click and drag and select that extra column, or in this case the total column, to include it, then click OK. Let me click Cancel. Then it would be added that extra field into your field list. Or if you don't want to go through all that, you can actually, the other option is to create your own custom calculated field. You can do that by clicking on the drop down arrow, going to Field Items and Sets, clicking on the drop down arrow, and do your own calculated field. Click on it, type in the name of the field, which is we can call it the total sales or total sold. And what we want to do is we want to go ahead and multiply the price of each product. Double click on that, and it adds it up here in the formula. And then the asterisk is for multiplication. Multiply that by the total quantity sold. You can double click on it or click on Insert Field. Then click OK, and there we go, it adds it. So we have the sum of the total sales. Of course, if you try to do the math here, you've got the quantity, and then we have the price each. Maybe you want to check that and add it. And you can see that, well, 19 times 4 equals 76. So you may want the total column over to the right. So how do we go ahead and reorganize this? Well, come down here into the values field here, then click sum of price and drag it up so it's in between the two. So then we have quantity, price of each, and then when we get the total sales. So 4 times 19 is 76, 10 times 38, 380. Next, if you're not getting your grand totals or your subtotals for your groups and you want to add them, or maybe you don't want them at the top of each group but at the bottom, come up here, click on the Design tab, go to the Layout, and there are your subtotals. You don't have to show them at all. Go ahead and click on that, they disappear. Or click on the drop down arrow, you can show them at the bottom of the group instead of at the top, and so there's the bottom for mountain camping and mountain lake sports. You have the title, the row label, and then at the bottom. I like them back up at the top. And then for the grand totals, you can turn them off for rows and columns. Turn them off, they disappear at the bottom. Or go ahead and click on the drop down arrow and say we want them on but for columns only, so we just have them turned on for the columns down below. Don't forget that you got formatting options when it comes to your pivot table. Come up here to the Design tab, your pivot table styles, click on the drop down arrow, maybe something in the medium section here. Go ahead and choose one of those. It updates. Makes it nice when the groups are collapsed. It has that in a shaded color, so I'm focusing on that in the white background here. And then also you can come up here to the pivot table styles options and have banded rows. That way it keeps your line focused within the row, because if you go down or up and you hit that blue line, you know you're going outside of that row. So if that's helpful, in any case. Also do banded columns. I'm going to go ahead and undo both of those. And then finally we can go ahead and set this up to be printed. For example, back on the Design tab to the Layout group, we can click on the blank rows and say we want to insert a blank line after each item here. So we got them after each group. Give you a little bit of spacing there when it comes to our report without having them all jumbled together. And then for the report, maybe I don't want to have this printed up above the filter items. I can go ahead and back in the field list, click and drag and get rid of that so that doesn't print. Come back up to Options, go to the Show group, and when you print your reports, do you want these little buttons showing, the plus, the minuses for those expanded and those collapsed, meaning that there's more data? It's up to you. If you don't want to see them, click on them to remove them. And then also, if you'd like to, you can remove the field headers as well, which is this header right here, meaning that, well, do they need to know that these are row labels? Perhaps not. In any case, when you're done, click on the File tab, go down to Print, because what you see here is what's going to print off. Thanks for watching. Hey, as a quick reminder, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also click on me and subscribe to my channel, get notified of the latest videos, and for only $2 a month, you can have access to all my Microsoft Office training videos.